No time status on SFAREGS is probably one of the most difficult ones to research because there's a lot of different reasons you could get this particular error message. The first thing I would suggest you do is confirm that when you ran SFRTMST that it completed successfully, because you ran that before you ran your error report. And I stated make sure it finishes completely before you start running your error report. But if someone didn't allow it to finish completely and went ahead and ran the error report, any student who hadn't been updated or touched could possibly have this error on your error report. Another reason is if the student's auditing all classes, because if a student's auditing all classes, their time status is going to be 0-0, which is not considered an appropriate time status. So when you have a student that's auditing all classes, you have to add a attribute to their account to ensure you can exclude them from it. Because if you remember when you were running SFR in SLC, on parameter number 2, you put in that attribute AUDT, and then you also could put in the second attribute, your college alpha PAY, if you couldn't record remove an EL from the student's SFAREGS records because they had fees attached to that term. But this particular one, if you have a student that's only auditing classes, you would enter AUDT. So then the other thing is you to check to see if the student withdrew from all of their courses, and if they did, was the registration status updated accordingly. And this should have been caught when you ran the withdrawal process, because if you go back and you look, you see that before you're supposed to run your error report, it tells you to run SFRTMST, it tells you to run SCPRMEL, which removes the ELs if it can, and then it tells you to run the withdrawal process to withdraw any students who have dropped or withdrawn from all of their courses. But typically, these are the reasons you would get that particular error. That's the reasons I've seen. So you can go and check SFR and make sure that it finished completely. However, this is not always going to be accurate because it could have still been running and you went ahead and started running your your error report while this was still running, but then it completed by the time you come back to look at it. So if you have a ton of these, like a lot of these errors, my suggestion would be go back and run this job. Make sure it's completed before you run your error report. Please note, when you access it, I'm sorry, I kind of went fast as I was talking, but let me show you. You go to SFRTMST, then you go to Related, then you go to Review Output, and then this is going to be null if it's your first time entering it. You double click next to the number, and that'll bring up every .list.log file for you that you've ever run this process. And they're put in date order so you can look at the one that you last ran. I think they're put in date order. Maybe they're not. Nope, they're put in date order. So then you double click on the latest one because that's the one that you ran when you were doing your testing, and you can see if you had any problems. Like you'll see when I ran this one, it told me I had problems because these 4 students had a time status of 0, which is not, acceptable. You can't have a time status of 0. So my question would be, why did the students have this? Was it because they should have been withdrawn and they weren't withdrawn prior to me running this time status job? But that may be something I would go and take a look at. So let's go ahead and go over to SFAREGS, because now we need to go see if the student was auditing all courses or if the student withdrew from all courses and just wasn't withdrawn from the college. I think I was running it for this time, but I can't remember. Let's just see. Now I'll go back and do another time. So let's see, it might have been 2018. that one. Okay, let me go back and look, see what term I ran that for. When I was running it. Go back to my outputs. I probably could have exported my output so that I wouldn't be. Look at my .log file. That it completed successfully. I'm going to click start over. Go back and look at my .list file. Let's see what term I ran it for. Let's see, I had quite a few. Oh, it says 2018-20. Okay, I'm going to try one more student. And if I can't, we'll just go look at a test student to just kind of look at SFAREGS and feel our way around. SFAREGS. I'll try this student and see. All right, well, let's just look at, let's just put, this one isn't going to have any records, but we at least can go in and take a look. Maybe not. Yeah, I'm not having much luck finding us a test student here to look at. Hold on. Okay, I was finally able to access the record, but this student doesn't have any records on them, but what you're looking for is if they have CRINs, you're going to be looking at the registration status code. So you're going to be looking at the status to see if they're got an AU. And if they have an AU status for every course, that means they're auditing all their courses. So an auditing student is not going to have any time status, and you have to exclude them from the report. And I'm going to show you how to exclude them. The second thing could be if you're looking at the status and the student has D codes, meaning drop codes, or W codes, withdrawal codes for all their courses, that means this status code up here should be a withdrawing code. And if you ran the batch job to withdraw students before you started, but then after you started researching and cleaning up your errors, that just means this student withdrew from his courses or dropped from his courses while you were actually cleaning up your other errors. So it just say, okay, I need to withdraw this student. And you could go run the batch job to withdraw the student again, or you could manually withdraw them. The directions on how to do that is in the LCTCS records and registration workbook. If the student is an audit student, though, if all the classes have the status of AU, meaning they're auditing, you have to go to that student's record and add an attribute, and then in the attribute. So I'm going to go ahead and start over. I'm actually going to get out of this form because I want to show you what you're going to have to do. So you're going to have to go to the attribute form, which is SGASADD. And then you're going to put that term that you're working with, 2018-30, you're going to say go. And then you're going to perform the next section to get down into the attribute field. And then you're going to add the attribute AUDT. I think it's AUTD. Yeah, I even have it wrong in the directions. And then you're going to save that. Now, once you add that, you're going to say okay, and then you're going to start over and you're going to end the attribute because you don't want this attribute to carry over to another term unless it's applicable. So you select start over. You're going to enter in the next term, the term after the term you're working on. So mine's 2018-30, so I'm going to enter in 2019-10, and I'm going to select go, and then I'm going to do a next section, and I'm going to select maintenance, and then I'm going to select end student attribute. And I'm going to say, save it, and say, okay. So now you'll see that this attribute is only good for the term of 2018-30 because it was ended for term 2019-10. Now, if the student comes in 2019-10 and they're auditing student only again, you would add the attribute again at that time. But you never want to leave it there because if you leave it there and that student actually becomes a credit-seeking student, then they would be excluded from your clearinghouse report because you have that attribute attached to them. So you want to make sure you add the attribute and you remove the attribute. Another reason, and I think we had mentioned this one earlier, is for the EL. So if the student, if you go to SFAREGS, the student has the registration status code of EL, and you can't record and have no courses attached, you can't record remove it. That means they have some fees that they've paid or some kind of payments attached to that record, so you can't get rid of it. And if that happens, you would also enter an attribute the same way we just did for this student, except it's a different attribute. It would be your college alpha plus PAY. So the directions give you a clear, defined step-by-step on what you need to do. The video is just kind of an overview, especially for this one, because there are so many moving parts on what could cause this particular error to show up on your error report.